Okay, so just kidding, that wasn't our last video. We're coming full circle to do our last video together here in my office, and it's really a win-win for everyone because Marv really wanted to be here for our last video together. So here he is, here we are, and I'm not exactly sure where the last video, where the sound pooped out. I'm sorry about that, but I hope you enjoyed the beginning image. I just thought it was a pretty cool moment in the studio there, so I wanted to keep it. Wanting to end the term with circling back to some of the questions we started with, namely, why anatomy? Why study anatomy? And specific then to our purposes as Alexander teachers, why study anatomy in the context of the Alexander technique? And then even more specific to our sort of imperative as Alexander teachers to be interested in going up, which is sort of an experiential phenomenon as well as an anatomical phenomenon, and relates to specifically the part of the body we've studied this term, namely the spine. So I just wanted to get some discussion going and get you thinking about how your ideas maybe about anatomy, about the spine, about your relationship to going up has maybe changed as a result or evolved as a result of the studying we've done this term. We started the term talking about that that cycle or that process of embodiment that body-mind centering offered us, with the different points of entry: visualization, somatization, and embodiment, different points of entering into your embodied experience. And just thinking about how the information you've gleaned through the course of these lectures and your experiential classes with Nanette and Peggy, how they have maybe enriched or given you more resources with which to engage with each or some of those points of entry of embodiment. So we've gotten a lot of sort of information about the nuts and bolts of the anatomical structures going on, and that can be valuable information in terms of entering into that experience specifically of directing yourself and directing your spine up. And we've also hopefully had some profound experiential moments, right, where that might not be so articulatable, is that a word? Able to be articulated in words, that might be nonverbal, that might be just experiences that you've amassed over the course of these lessons in these classes that have changed your relationship to your spine or to going up, that you might not be able to articulate in words. And just to remind ourselves that for our purposes, we're not placing a value judgment on one or the other being more or less valuable. That it's all information, whether or not it's information from your experience, information from anatomical images, or information or books or ideas that we've read about from various people. It's all material to enrich your own experience. And so I just wanted us to do a little reflection at this end of the term. And I've been thinking about that a lot. I just wrote a paper on John Dewey and tried to kind of link Dewey up with the technique and with movement and as an intellectual practice, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things that I came across, or that I was thinking about with Dewey, that I really like about Dewey, is how he and Alexander were really ahead of their time 100 years ago, claiming the value of subjective data as equal to scientific data. And I think this overlaps with some of what you thought about with Rajal relative to the scientific inquiry and scientific process. But just thinking about all the different kinds of information we have, all the kinds of data we have as important and relevant to what we do. So to this end, and I really saw this firsthand in terms of there being so many different entry points into anatomy, into the study of anatomy this term. It was sort of an anatomy heavy 10 weeks for me, or 13 weeks for me, doing these videos. And then also I was taking here at the university cadaver lab in the PT department. And I was taking an anatomy and kinesiology class through the dance department that was more focused on sort of a dance perspective. And just how how totally radically different all of those points of entry are, and all really useful for different times, for different purposes. And what a different hands-on experience it was working with a cadaver versus and getting that very specific kind of hands-on information, actually touching the insides of muscles and fascia and ligament and all the stuff that we've been talking about. And then the kind of hands-on that we do in the Alexander Technique, where we're also getting equally as important and relevant information about what's going on with the body. So anyway, those are kind of my thoughts. And I wanted to suggest we do a little bit of a creative exercise for this last week, and it was sort of inspired by, in my graduate composition class, we were asked to write a personal manifesto, sort of relative to our artistic or creative practice. But I found it a really useful, it was daunting at first, but a really useful exercise in terms of thinking about that question of what do I really believe? What really works for me today? Yeah, and knowing that my manifesto today could be different than tomorrow, could be different than next week and next year. But really forcing myself to sort of whittle down to get rid of the excess and really get to the nut of what I believe today. And so I thought it could be interesting to do something similar with our relationship to going up and to our spine. Yeah. Because I find that my relationship to this sort of upward direction and to engaging with my axial support really does change and is changing and evolving as I go on and learn more and go deeper into my practice and teaching of the Alexander Technique. So I thought it might be interesting for us to all try to articulate sort of where we are in that process for ourselves. So to that end, I put up a few resources on Google Classroom. There's a Irene Dowd, who's a fantastic anatomist. She was one of Amy Matthews' main teachers and influences, and teaches all the anatomy classes at Juilliard. And she's this really astute anatomist. I mean, she really understands, has a sort of scientific mind. And she writes in this very almost like poetic, very imaginative way. And so I put up a chapter from her book, Taking Root to Fly, on the spine. It's kind of an ode to her spine. Yeah, and she doesn't talk about it exactly as going up, but a lot of the language she uses, I think, could be relevant to what we do. And it's really clear from her writing and from this chapter that she loves her spine and loves embodying her spine. And I put up a list, you'll also see on Google Classroom, just of some adjectives she used, just to kind of get some creative juices flowing. Some examples: light, celestial, liquidity, sunward, silky, erupting, sparks, bubbles, ripples, rooted, winged, gateway, passageway, melting, uncoiling. Yeah, so read that. And then I also put up an excerpt from the Tai Chi Classics, and I will butcher how it's pronounced, but Nanette can help you with that. The Tai Chi Chuan, maybe? Anyway, also some really different language in more poetic, almost haiku, not quite haiku exactly, but short poetic form. So check that out. Here are a couple of adjectives from that little selection. It's just a few pages. So light, nimble, strung together, excited, internally gathered, rooted, released, manifested, simultaneously, move up, downward idea, discontinuities and continuities. And yeah, and then I also put up 2 chapters from Walter's book, which you may have already read or have, Generating the Energy to Go Up and Lengthening in Stature. And just again, to get a sense of how he's talking about this imperative to go up. And he uses some anatomical information, some of it a little outdated, but he also uses his very Walter, sort of simple and poetic in his way, language around talking about what is essential to going up. So My suggestion is that we each come up with some sort of creative expression or ode to going up, or a manifesto about your spine, if you will, that could be in any form. It could be a poem, it could be a song, it could be, in my graduate comp class, someone made a painting and that was their manifesto. It could be more of a, an essay or something written out. But I think actually shorter is better. Really getting to that essence of what is working for you now relative to everything we've studied this term. What makes sense to you? What resonates in your bones, literally? What do you believe in, or what really speaks to you on that level of being, and being in your body, and being a body that wants to go up. And I think it's a really interesting place to be, because this phenomenon of going up is an anatomical reality. It happens. But often the experience of going up is one that is more, poetic, at least for me. And to my knowledge, no one has really come up with a clear explanation of what is happening physiologically, scientifically, when we go up. So science doesn't have the answer, or we have as much of an answer to offer as science does, or our answer is science as much as science is science. So see if you can take a stab at coming up with some sort of expression of your relationship to your spine or to going up, and in class maybe we can all share them with each other. I think that could be really cool. So I'd love if you could videotape it or email me your what you come up with. I'd be really curious to see. I haven't had time to write one for this specific task, but I did upload to Google Classroom the little manifesto I wrote for my comp class, just so you could see how another format might be. I just had 4 sort of short points, or 4 imperatives. And I think that's about it. So I'll look forward to seeing you in person on Wednesday. Hi, Brandon. I'm videotaping myself, but I'm just done. Anyway, and I'll see you soon. Okay.